introduce the webinar with opening remarks. The floor is yours, Jen.
Okay, I start. Good morning, everyone. First off, I would like to thank all participants and the Florence School of Regulation that have allowed the organization of this event. Thank you again, Professor Soucier and Mrs. Salvetti. I also would like to thank very much all colleagues that have worked hard to plan this meeting a few weeks ago. I would like to welcome you also on behalf of ARERA, the Italian Authority for Energy and Networks and Environment, that since the end of 2017 has been assigned also with the competence to regulate waste management service in Italy. Together with another member of the network of European Municipal Waste Regulators, ARERA thinks that it is of a great importance to study and debate the economics of municipal waste. To help policymakers and regulators to make effective and consistent decisions. That's why the network support FSR in its effort to research economics and of municipal waste in the framework of the circular economy. Just a few months ago, we have approved the first regulatory framework, and in the regular session of today's workshop, Mr. will illustrate you more details, our tariff method, also the support circular economy. The circular economy is a milestone. Everything around us come from Earth. Resources are not infinite, and full recovery is our main goal for future generations. Recycling is a link of the chain, a necessary condition, but not sufficient. And for the best recycling must be treated with a special plant that allow for full reuse. The concept of zero waste is an utopia, and in order to try solving the problem, we need a variety of solutions without any exclusion. This main principle of our national regulation in Italy are following: cost transparency, support the effective and full recycle, diminish drastically the use of the waste dumps. Every region in Italy will be able to handle our own waste. Today, representatives of different countries and European institutions are present. And in my opinion, it is important to have a continuous exchange of information and experience in order to harmonize all European countries to a virtuous behavior. Thank you very much again for your attention, and I have a nice working day. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jenny. I will not spend a lot of time to try to convince you the way municipal waste is organized is a crucial topic. I believe that if you are here for this webinar, this is because you are convinced. I mean, this time of global warming, municipal waste regulation is facing many challenges linked to circular economy, linked to regulation, consumers' behavior, and we will talk about all this during this morning. Our idea was to address some of those challenges, these webinars with our speakers, and we've got a terrific program today. We've got many good speakers, maybe too many good speakers, because I will have to enforce strict rules of the game, basically. So we will start the the webinar right now with Maria that will set up the scene of municipal solid waste in Europe. So Maria, you will have 10 minutes to present. And then we will organize the webinar with sessions, and every speaker will have 5 minutes to present, and I will try to enforce the rules of the game very strictly. And then we will have 10 to 15 minutes for question and answer to discuss about those issues. 10 to 15, depending on my ability to really strictly enforce the rules of the game. If you want to ask questions, you need to go to the Q&A part of Zoom, and you need to ask your questions to write them. And I will pick some of the question, or maybe all of the questions. It depends on the time we will have during the webinar. So I believe to start right now with Maria. So Maria, you've got 10 minutes to present your paper.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So let me share my screen with you. And basically, well, I'll try to set a little bit the scene, you know, for our workshop and for the discussions that we're going to have on municipal solid waste in Europe. So over the last 2 decades, the EU has adopted a set of legislation aiming at reducing waste generation impacts by shifting municipal solid waste management from waste disposal that you can see at the bottom of this triangle to waste preparing for reuse and recycling, so that you can see on the top of this triangle, thus trying to move basically municipal solid waste management up into this waste hierarchy. So I was mentioning a set of legislation, so this set of legislation basically is composed of 4 main directives that I'm just mentioning, and I won't be commenting and going into the details really of the table that you have in front of you that is summing up all the targets that lies ahead, so to speak, of the operators and the different member states in the EU. But so among those 4 directives, you have the landfill directive, which dates back 1999. Then there is the waste framework directive that's been revised recently. There is the single-use plastic directive, which is dated 2018, and the amended version of the packaging and packaging waste directive. So as you can see, it's really a set of legislation that has been adopted across the last 20 years. And these directives, they define very specific and challenging targets for municipal solid waste collection and management. And of course, those targets, those very ambitious objectives, well, they are intended along with the circular economy package to boost actually the transition towards circular economy. And how to do that? Well, by maximizing the value of the waste materials that are collected, by minimizing the material and resources consumption, and by preventing waste generation. So I know that some of the following speakers will also mention some of the targets that you can see in this slide. So I will not spend too much time, you know, on these targets, but just have some of them in mind, because in some of the information that I'll be sharing with you in the following slides, the targets for 2020 and the ones for 2035 are key elements that are used to assess the investment efforts that lies ahead, you know, to reach the targets of 2035. So just keep that in mind regarding the landfilling, with a maximum of 10% right here, and the 65% of municipal waste recycling. So Well, okay. Well, now we know we have put very briefly, very shortly what lies ahead in terms of objectives. But where do we start? Where do we start from? What is the current state of the sector? Well, one first thing that we can say is that the sector is pretty fragmented and atomized, with more than 47,700 waste operators, both public and private operators across EU 28. Those are figures from Eurostat dated 2018. Actually, approximately 3/4 of those operators are micro companies. So they're very small companies, and we only have a few big players, in the game, a few big operators in the game, but 99% of these waste operators are SMEs, so very fragmented, with a small number of employees, so very fragmented market, but nevertheless a pretty dynamic market with an annual turnover of 184 billion euros. And with this turnover, with collection accounting for 41% of this turnover, materials recovery 33%, and treatment and disposal 23%. And the sector has proven quite dynamic, actually, over the past years, from 2011 to 2017, with an increase of 26% of the turnover of the sector, which is actually pretty dynamic. And when we compare it to water is a lot less dynamic, is twice as less dynamic, for instance, compared to waste. The reason why I'm comparing is because this waste webinar is organized by the water area and department of the FSR. So obviously, this is a bit of a natural comparison for me. Talking about the funding scheme, of the sector, well, it relies on several sources and several financial flows. So you have the fees that are paid by the users. Obviously, you have the public funds, whether they are coming from municipal, regional, or national budget. And you have, of course, some grants and transfers coming from the European Union funds, or from international financial organizations, such as EIB, that we will be listening later on. So granting some loans and for projects, but I will let, of course, Jonas talk about that a lot better than myself. And we have also some funding deriving from extended producer responsibility schemes, so that we call EPR schemes, so that you see over here, EPR schemes, so coming from producers that are organized, let's say, to collect some funds to fund some recycling, collection, waste treatment and recycling schemes. Okay, so this is like what the sector, let's say, looks like. So now, where do we stand with regard to EU municipal waste collection and management targets? Well, in 2018, 30% of the municipal waste was recycled, 28% was incinerated, 23% landfill, and 17% composted. So although landfilling has declined steadily since 1995, it still remains well above the 2035 targets of 10% in 19 EU member states. So obviously you'll say, well, today is only 2020, so we have a bit of time ahead of us. But just keep in mind that 19 EU member states are still pretty far from the targets that I mentioned in the first table regarding the 10%. Recycling and composting remains below 50%. in 20 countries, and this you can easily see it on that slide, you know, with so this line being the landfilling target of 10%, and this one being the 50% recycling and composting target. And as you can see, well, here in green you have the recycling and composting. So basically, when we're up here, all the remaining countries do not reach this recycling and composting targets of 50%, which was to be reached. This one was to be reached by 2020. So here we are facing current, I'd say current issues with regard to EU targets. For this one, as I was mentioning earlier, well, it has to be reached by 2035. So I mean, there is some work, you know, that lies ahead, you know, with landfilling being shown in purple. So each time, basically, that we're below this red line means that there's still some work to do, you know, to reach the target by 2035. So indeed, there is some work to do, and obviously some investments basically are required to meet either the 2020 targets or the 2035 targets. So there is a study that has been commissioned by the European Commission, which was done by COWI and Eunomia, and that was published in 2019. And so this study tried to estimate, you know, the capex needs to achieve the targets that are set for 2035. And the capex needs, according to that study, equals to 31.5 billion euros. So in EU 28, that would amount to 2.1 billion per year until 2035. As you can see, the major financial effort would be directed towards collection, as you can see over here, with 35% of this overall investment needs, then followed by recycling and reprocessing, 34%, and bio-waste with 24%. As you can see on the bottom graph, well, there is a wide variety of situation, obviously, you know, with France at one hand, you know, having to invest approximately 5 billion euros, while in Malta it would be 100 times lower with regard to the financial needs. Of course, when you compare that with per capita needs, the picture is quite different. So although this study does exist, one of the issues that we notice with the study is that it takes for granted that 2020 targets have been met, which, as we've seen, you know, in the previous slides, which is not the case. So we do believe that this capex needs might be underestimated, and this is very, very something that we can definitely discuss, and it's a very interesting point to discuss. Of course, today during this webinar, but also later on, you know, in the work that we can do at the Florence School of Regulation. So my last slide would be to say, well, basically, you know, taking into account and taking stock, you know, of the current situation of municipal waste management in Europe and of the upcoming challenges for the sector, well, regulation appears really crucial, you know, to play a key role, especially in a context, you know, where important investments will have to be made to reach those very ambitious and challenging recycling objectives. Also in a context where the sector faces long-lasting structural issues, such as the fragmentation that I mentioned, such as the small size market that I also mentioned, and all of that is preventing sometimes the sector from generating sufficient financial resources to face those massive investment needs. So in this context, well, regulatory issues will play a key role, and regulators, regardless of the institutional setup of the sector, which is obviously different in each member state, regardless of this institutional setup, well, regulatory questions and issues will be key, such as strengthening the financial viability of services, increasing the cost reflexivity of tariff, improving the cost recovery, incentivizing investment through economic regulation of rate of return in the context of very important investment needs, effective use of economic and policy tools to improve technical and economic efficiency, separate collection schemes. So here also with sufficient treatment capacity and sufficient market absorption capacity, which is today a real issue. And of course, we do need to enhance quality of monitoring data because what you cannot assess and quantify, well, then it is difficult to manage it properly. So I'll finish right there, but I'll be very happy to share your views, on those questions and those elements later on during the webinar. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. You're right on time. So there is no question for this presentation. We will regroup all the questions with your presentation and the next session. So I propose to switch right now to the session concerning the European framework. And Mattia Pellegrini, the floor is yours if you want to share your screen.
Yes. Hello, I don't know if you can see me now. Good morning, everybody.
It's perfect.
Perfect, okay. And I don't know if you can project my presentation yourself, or you expect me to do it?
We expect you to do it. So you just click on the
now the
share
only
screen.
Okay, the only problem is I have it in the other, on my laptop, and I'm connecting with the, because I've sent it to you as well, so I can do it, but I need to connect now from my...
I believe this is okay, Mattia. So
okay, yes. You can see me or not? Yes.
Yes, we can see you. You can go on.
If you can just go to the next slides, I will focus only on some of them. Next slide. Okay. So that's, I just wanted to start with the European Green Deal, because I think we have to understand that, and I think the previous presentation was perfect because it was fully in line with what I intend to present, is the fact that in addition to all these targets which were existing, because as it was mentioned by the previous speaker, all these reforms were carried out in 2018, what has happened at the end of 2020, in December of 2020, on the 11th of December, it was this major revolution, I would call it like this, of the European Green Deal. So for the first time, the European Commission has put the issue of environment as the main priority of the European Commission. And this is what is called the European Green Deal. And why this was done, here you have some data. We are consuming resources in a way which is threefold as compared to the past, as compared to 1970. There has been a biodiversity loss of more than 90%. There is a never-ending increase of CO2 emission. And more importantly, and this is really what is linked with the circular economy, only 12% of the materials which are used in the market are they come back to recycling. So we are talking about an economy which is still very linear economy. So for that reasons, the European Commission decided to elaborate the Green Deal. If we go to the next slide. Okay, indeed, as I mentioned to you, out of the 6 political priorities of the new Commission, the European Green Deal is considered, and it is even now after the COVID, the priority #1 for the Commission 2019-2024. Next slide. And what I want to draw your attention, as you know, the Green Deal is made of many different, let's say, components. And but the component in which I'm working as an head of unit in charge of waste management and secondary raw materials is the component which is mobilizing industry for a clean and circular economy. If we go to the next slide. Yeah. So what is important is that the Green Deal, and I wanted to also make that point indeed, and I'm very happy that the previous colleague has mentioned the study that my unit has carried out on the investment needs. Of course, you don't just need the policies, but the Green Deal is very clear that you need to finance that transition. That's the reason why a specific fund, which is called the Just Transition Fund, was created to implement all these policies. I mean, the example that the previous speaker was giving about the cost of implementing the existing legislation on waste is nothing compared to all the new legislation which is coming up, and that will require even a stronger environmental transition. So indeed, you can not only have policies, you need to couple them with proper financing. So I'm very happy that there will be also speakers which they will be talking on the finance side. If we can move now to the next slide. Next slide, I don't need to focus on that since the time is limited. Okay, that is very important. Is on March of this year, on the 11th of March, the European Commission presented the new Circular Economy Action Plan. As you know, there was a previous action plan, and now there has been the new Circular Economy Action Plan. And I think what is very important is that was very clear in the speech of our president that the focus should really be on these sectors which are highly resource intensive. So for example, textile and construction, I will come to that point because as you know, textile and construction at the moment, we do not have targets for recycling and reuse. This is a new area of activity, but indeed, these are sectors which they consume a lot of raw materials. And of course, I think as also our commissioner, Sinkevicius said, I mean, indeed, you need the full set of material, which they go from the production all the way to consumption. And I will come back to that point. So if we go now to the next slide.
You've got 30 seconds to conclude, Mattia.
Okay. What we need, I think what is important is that we need two transformations. One is the green transformation, the other one is the digital transformation. They can be coupled together. If we go to the next slide, indeed, that is what I wanted to mention, is that with the new Circular Economy Action Plan, we are not focusing on anymore only on waste, which we have discussed in the previous slides, but we're focusing also on the product design, so on the way products are designed. And this will be require a revision, which will coming up very soon in next year, in 2021, of the Eco Design Directive. Also, we will have this type of design of products regulations in the existing sectorial revision of existing waste legislation. So we're going to revise the directive on batteries this year in October, and next year the one on packaging and the one on end-of-life vehicles, plus the waste shipment regulation. So there will be plenty of opportunity to engage with new legislation coming up from Brussels to implement this new vision of the Circular Economy Action Plan. If the time is limited, I can stop here, and then if there are follow-up questions, I can come back.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I propose to move to Oriana Romano, that is our second speaker, and that we talk about how to switch from a linear economy to a circular economy or something like that, no?
Something like that. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, perfectly.
Great, thanks. Yes, so thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to contribute to this workshop and to provide an overview that is a little bit beyond Europe and concern OECD countries. When we look at the state of the art that Maria already showed for Europe, and we look at the OECD countries, we have basically some trends that have been improved over time. So we can see that basically municipal solid waste represents only a small share of the total waste generated, about 10% of the total waste. However, its management and treatment represent at least 1/3 of the public sector financial efforts. When we look at the production, we have that in the OECD area, on average, a person generates 520 kilograms of municipal waste per year, which is good news compared to the early 2000s, so 30 kilogram less, but still is 20 kilogram more than in 1990. If we look at the treatment operations, there are good and bad news in the sense that the share of landfill in municipal waste treatment remains still very high. In 2017, we had 42% was landfilled, 36% went for recovery and composting, and 22% was incinerated. The share of municipal landfill decreased from 60% to 40%, more or less, between 1995 and 2017. There are several countries, like, for example, Australia, Germany, Ireland, Korea, that recycle more than 1/3 of the municipal waste they manage. So there are some advancement, but still, as also Maria highlighted in her presentation, there is still a lot to do. I would like now to focus on the role of the circular economy and the link with the municipal waste. And I would like to do this by demystifying three myths on the circular economy and waste. So the first myth is that circular economy is about waste treatment. I would say yes, but not only. Circular economy is about designing out waste and pollution, and is made of a series of upstream and downstream activities. So it is not only about what happened once the waste is produced, it's a much more complex, holistic, and systemic system. So a circular waste system is the one where waste generation is prevented, where the final treatment and disposable model is replaced by a recovery model, where we have a market for secondary raw materials, and this secondary material will satisfy the prominent percentage of demand of materials for good production. It is a system where information flows are established, and it's a system where innovation, investment, and economic instruments allow this transition. And this means removing subsidies for the linear economy, applying market-based mechanism, for example, rewarding circular business models. It means providing risk-sharing financial instruments, and so on. So this is the first. The second myth to demystify is that circular economy is a synonym of recycling. Is not. There are a wide range of activities in the circular economy strategies looking at how products and goods are produced, distributed, shared, consumed, and then disposed. So recycling is one of the alternatives, but basically is not the most efficient one, because it means that the waste has been produced, is not being treated as a resource, and we saw that there is not a secondary material. Only 10% of recycled can be actually reused for new product. So if we look at several strategies, for example, the city of Amsterdam is very well advanced in this sense. There are focused activities on a specific stream of waste, including organic waste, and a series of activities to make sure that awareness is raised, that business managers, schools, neighborhood and communities are all involved in making this system happen on the ground. The third myth to demystify is that the circular economy is a response to waste issues. If you look at this infographic that we prepared, is basically based on the preliminary result of a global survey that we carried out at the OECD across around 40 cities. We have been now collecting more data, so the report will be published in September with a much wider sample of data. But so far, what we can say that if we divide cities and according to the production of waste kilograms inhabitants per year. The cities that basically are more active towards the circular economy are those that are producing less solid waste. And we're talking here about household waste per person, which in OECD area is around 400 kilograms per capita. Very briefly to conclude.
Oh, yeah, you've got only 1 minute, Oriana.
1 minute to conclude is that there are several of course activities and initiatives that can be taken by a range of actors, including regulators, policymakers, operators in a shared responsibility. It is important to shift from waste plans to resource plan to really have a shift of mindset, improve information on how to recycle, reuse, and control this information, monitoring the quality of the information, set up conditions for market of secondary materials, including through fiscal instruments, and update and adapt the regulation, because in most of the cases is the very same definition of waste that represent an obstacle on how waste streams can be reused and put them in circle to closing the loops in the economy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Oriana. We will switch to the last presentation of this session. So after the European Commission and after the OECD point of view, let's say, we will switch to the European Investment Bank and to Jonas Bistrom. Jonas, can you share your screen and open your mic?
Hello everyone, Jonas here. I'm trying to start my video. I will probably have to stop it so that you can hear me. It seems that it's not even starting. I will actually then just take it out and rather focus on the sharing the screen. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, for some reason this is very slow. Anyway, I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see the screen. I'm trying to make it full screen mode, and that for some reason is not really possible. That I hope look better. So my name is Jonas Bistrom. I'm working for the European Investment Bank, which is the EU bank. We have a mandate to support projects that implement EU policy. We are also the climate bank. We have a goal and a target to, by 2025, ensure that 50% of our lending is supporting climate and environmental sustainability objectives. And I'm working in a division where we focus, among others, on solid waste management, but also on circular economy. And I'm therefore grateful for the opportunity to be part of this webinar, and thank FSR for the invitation. I will start a bit by also looking at the targets that drive development. And we have heard from a couple of speakers already that the EU acquis, the EU policy framework, have really contributed to advanced developments on the European and the EU continent. Already 75, the first waste framework directive was adopted, and the first targets, I think, were put in place 1994 with the packaging waste directive. And now, as I've been explained, we have, with the latest update, quite ambitious targets. In the table, I've tried to summarize a bit where we stand. It mirrors what has been shown before, but show a few things that could be worth dwelling on. First, looking at the EU average, we can see that, albeit having targets for many decades now, more than 50% of the municipal waste generated is still either put in landfills or incinerated. So less than half is recovered through material recycling or composting digestion. We can also see that there is quite a large difference. First of all, with regard to generation, ranging from 272 kilogram per capita a year in Romania up to 814 in Denmark. And while this to some extent could reflect via variations in how you describe, how you define municipal waste, it really shows that there is a large variation, and in some countries a large potential to work on the prevention side, reducing the generation and continue to try to decouple the economic growth with the waste generation. But looking at the way waste is treated, we can see that there are some countries with quite high recycling levels and some with quite low. And interesting is that the two extremes are both what we sometimes refer to as new member states, those that joined in 2004. So Slovenia, albeit being behind policy-wise the older countries, is now leading with regard to recycling achievements, while Malta, being an island state, still have quite a bit to go. And then we can see that Austria has made quite an effort on diverting organic waste. And then we can see that there are countries with a lot of focus on incineration still, the Nordic countries, for example, where there are a lot of good opportunities to recover the heat in district heating systems, but also a big variation in landfilling, where many countries, in particular Nordic countries, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, almost landfill nothing. They report in Eurostat only 1% of thereabouts. Still, I think we can conclude that in addition to in this table then see that there is a large variation, and some countries really have more to do, and in other countries maybe there is a need to shift and work on prevention. We can still conclude that today we have largely a linear management of waste. And I think that the policymakers in Brussels have, through the new targets, some of which are listed here, those that we believe really will drive the developments and the investments, are really aiming at turning this to a more circular management of waste. And the packaging waste recycling target, the 65% municipal waste recycling target, are of course important driver, as is the maximum 10% landfill disposal limit. But 2023, all countries also need to start collect bio-waste separately, and later also 2 years later textiles. And this will in many countries and many cities require a lot of investments and a lot of public awareness building to get the citizens to cooperate and to get the infrastructure in place. And all this will hopefully then contribute to a more circular management of waste. The question is then what EIB have done and what we can do to support this circular economy transition, in particular in the waste field, which is the focus of today. And we do that, of course, as a bank by financing infrastructure equipment for separate collection, materials, bio-waste. We finance facilities for treatment of such streams, material recovery facilities, recycling facilities, composting and anaerobic digesting facilities. But in addition to that, we also have advisory. We know that there are promoters that may need the help to make products sound, bankable, and also then acceptable for the EIB. And we have various advisory initiatives that can support such promoters. What we also work on is to try to share knowledge that we have gained in the EIB and build awareness. And we have done that through a couple of documents. You will find the first pages here, and you will have a link where you can download the documents. We have also developed together with the Hub and in the context of the Urban Agenda Partnership, a Circular City Funding Guide that highlights what we and many others believe is an important context within which this circular transition can take place. The cities where you have a concentration of producing companies, of consuming citizens, you have material, you have waste flows that can be turned circular. You have the potential to close loops, but you also have city administrations that can facilitate, that can enable, that can incentivize circular developments. And therefore we think that cities can really be both cradles and catalysts for circular change. And what is clear, as mentioned also by Oriana, is that in the EIB, we are not thinking that circular economy is recycling. On the other hand, we think that recycling is part of the circular economy, maybe in a transition period, because in a long-term perspective, ideally, we should have less and less waste thrown away for recycling and more of circular design and production that close loops before we need to recycle products. We should also really work on the circular use and life extension. And in our circular economy guide, you will find the ways that the EIB, together with others in a working group, have defined and tried to define 4 different categories for the circular economy and for the projects, where one of them is circular value recovery, and where then recycling and material recovery is one component, but where we also focus on the recovery.
You need to conclude. You are running out of time.
Very good. Then with that, I will just say that you will have the links on this last slide. You will have a LinkedIn group that you can join for the Circular City funding guide. And you will also find an email address where you can address us with regard to circular economy and how we support this both in the waste management field and in other circular fields. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we are more than 110 people connected to the webinar right now. I've got some questions coming from the floor. I've got also some questions to raise, and we've got only 4 to 5 minutes to organize a Q&A, because I don't know who organized this webinar, but it's running out of time as I expected. Maybe I've got one question concerning the data. I mean, the first speaker, Mattia, you talk about digitalization. Oriana, you talk about data we need to collect and so on at the city level. So there is one question that is, what kind of data for city, region, and the percentage for circular economy? Do you have some answer concerning this? I've got also some reaction maybe concerning your 3 presentation. I was thinking about digitalization, and does it mean that we need to have some platforms that will collect the data, and maybe some platforms that will be in a monopoly situation that we produce data, services, new services, as we see in other sectors? Also, I was thinking about a lot of the presentation we are focusing on waste produced at the city level per capita and so on. And what we see is that the waste produced at the capita is increasing or stagnating, but it is not decreasing very much. So the true question maybe is, how do we disconnect GDP and waste production, and what kind of incentives we could provide to whom? I mean, to companies, to consumers, to cities, or to at the national level. I mean, Oriana, for example, you focused a lot on smart cities, city level. Jonas, also, you focused a lot at the city level. I'm not sure we don't need to have some smart nation too. I mean, so I would like you to have some kind of answer on this. And maybe my last comment is, yes, it was Maria, you talk about investment. We need huge investment to achieve objectives. We've got exactly the same kind of conclusion for the water sector. I was very surprised by the very low level of investment we need. I mean, it was 5 billion euros for France, a little bit less for Italy and UK, if I remember well. By the end, it doesn't seem to be high, a huge investment compared to other sectors. So I was quite surprised about this, and maybe the speakers have some comments about this. And there is one last question that is coming from the floor. That is that the EU taxonomy has just been adopted, and the question is, should this will discourage investment in waste incineration from European Union, but also national public funding? Do you have some answers on this? And that's it. So yes, I believe this is okay for the questions. So obviously you can pick up 1 or 2 comments, 1 or 2 questions. You've got 1 or 2 minutes to react, and then we will move to the second session, because I don't want to run too much out of time. So we want to start.
I can start, Stefan.
Okay, Oriana.
Yeah, so very briefly to reply to your questions, there are several, first on information. Information is still a challenge, especially when it comes to total waste stream, their recovery and the use of secondary raw material. There are several municipalities, or it depends on which kind of operator, but basically it's very difficult to have an understanding of how waste is treated and have harmonized, some standardized data and coordinated data across municipality in the OECD area. So it's still very hard to have a harmonized data set, and this is something that is very challenging. Regarding the role of cities produce already 50% of global waste, and this percentage is projected to double by 2050. It is true that is very much related to GDP and production and consumption patterns. So the way that this could be reduced is certainly, as Jonas was mentioning, design differently, also not only the product but also the cities and how all the waste stream in cities are produced. I, for example, can refer to the construction sectors, to the food waste, to several other streams, like even, for example, water, that can be used in a way that is more efficient, and then the materials themselves can be reused. Finally, in terms of instruments, in order to do so, there is a role that can be played by the digital economy within smart cities, for example, to check upon the waste stream and how it is separately collected. And there are several examples of digital cards, for example, in San Sebastian in Spain. But there are also economic instruments that can be used: deposit refund system, pay as you throw, differentiated tariff for waste separation, discount on waste tariff, which are instruments that are not always in place in the cities that participated, for example, in the OECD survey. So lots of work still to do.
Yes, I believe we will talk about those incentives schemes during the other sessions. Somebody wants to react, or do we move to the next session because we're already running a little bit out of time?
Can I just say maybe a few points? I will be very fast on the issue of the digital and data space. I just wanted to mention that in the New Circular Economy Action Plan, there is clearly an announcement that the Commission will develop a data space. So the idea is that we will start to have information about every product in this digital data space. And actually, in the revision of the Batteries Directive, which is foreseen for October of this year, there will be a prototype of this policy, which will be the digital passport for batteries. So you will have a passport attached to every battery which will be sold in the European market, containing both static and dynamic data. So that's something which you should follow closely. Then on the reuse, indeed, there were a number of questions. It is, although there is higher in the waste hierarchy, there seems to be less focus, but indeed, in all the legislative revision which we are doing, we are putting a strong focus on reuse. So for example, I will use again the example of batteries, where we are very busy now. In legislating batteries, we will have in the new batteries regulation specific provision for the second life of batteries. So as you know, batteries of an electric car, when they come to the end of their life, they can be used then after an electric car for energy storage. So the idea is that we will be this opportunity of having a second life before going for recycling. So this is something which is not regulated at all in the current Batteries Directive, but will be regulated in the new Batteries Regulation adopted in October. So indeed, it's a very good point, the one on reuse. Finally, on investment, you are fully right. I was, when I was appointed head of unit of this unit, which we needed to contribute to the recovery plan, I was really impressed on a negative way by how little there were the investment needs calculated by Onomia. I think I have a number of ideas why they are so little. Clearly, one of the ideas is because they've been taken, as it was mentioned by the first speaker, the assumption is that everybody will meet the targets which are set out in the European legislation, which is not the case at the moment. But in addition to that, as I said, there will be plenty of new legislation coming up. So clearly, the investment needs will be much higher. And in relation to your question of what nations should be doing, not only cities and regions, indeed, what I would really invite all countries, starting from Italy, where there is some issues with the waste management, is to put in the recovery plans that they have to present in order to get funded via the new instrument of the recovery fund. They should include in these national plans, for sure, in my view, the waste management as one of the key areas of action. So that is clearly what I see as what can be done at the national level.
Okay, thank you very much. Janos, you want to say a word? Yes.
Yeah, very briefly complement. I think the question on investment needs, I think there have been some explanations on maybe assumptions made in the study that could be part of the explanation, but I think it also reflects that going forward, there will be less need in investing in the large, heavy infrastructure for residual waste treatment, such as incinerators, and more a need to invest in lighter, separate collection systems and the kind of treatment facilities needed for bio-waste and materials, which are less investment heavy than for residual waste treatments. I think that is one explanation. And for the EIB, that means that we may need to, or we do also adopt instruments which cater to this, not just large investment loans, but we have framework loans where we can, to a city, extend a credit line, and they can then invest in many different smaller components. We also work through intermediary banks who are able to extend or on lend to the smaller components. I think we are well set to contribute to this next phase, even though it will mean less of the large, heavy residual waste treatment facilities.
Thank you very much for this very stimulating session. Maria is already in the starting block to see if she will be better compared to me to make the schedule respected. So Maria, the floor is yours for the second session.
Yeah, I'm always sure that we need a woman in charge, to keep the timing. So I'll try to do that properly. Putting pressure on myself. So now we're moving on to a session on regulatory framework and economics. And I will right away give the floor to Giovanni Tagliatella from Waste Reg, the network of European Waste Regulator. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. I would first and foremost like to thank Florence School of Regulation for having organized this meeting today, as well as speakers and attendants, of course. My aims for the next 5, 6, 7 minutes are two. First, to shortly introduce the network of EU municipal waste regulators. And two, to put forward the view that sound economic regulation can be a very helpful tool to deliver on circular economy. So let me first recall some contexts. As Maria's presentation clearly pointed out, the municipal waste industry is undergoing very deep changes. As the EU's objectives in terms of environmental sustainability become more and more challenging, public finance constraints and the current economic downturn call for more attention than ever when it comes to increasing citizen spending on services and when it comes to rising taxes. Moreover, the shift to the new sustainability model makes the waste industry more capital intensive, which leads to the search for economies of scale. Throughout Europe, local and national institutions strive to adapt their legal frameworks and industry to the new challenges. Now that economies of scale increasingly apply to waste management, major member states ensure that municipalities aggregate into larger administrative areas. Though not everywhere, of course, a trend towards centralization can be observed. All in all, member states are ultimately responsible for complying with EU regulation. And that's why member states are more and more taking the waste management seriously in actually back in their hands. Some member states have taken a step forward on this path and established national independent agencies charged with overseeing quality level, tariff setting, and contractual obligations of waste services providers. These member states are Hungary, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Portugal, and Romania. In Portugal, we have a particular situation because due to the fact that the autonomous region of Azores indeed has very particular needs, Portugal decided to establish actually 2 regulators. What is worth noticing here is that we did not detect cases in which a member state chose to establish a dedicated regulators only for waste. Actually, we are talking about a model in which the previous regulators responsible for overseeing other utilities have been granted new powers in terms of regulating municipal waste. Otherwise, member states choose to establish a regulator responsible for water and waste. These regulators perform different competencies and face different contexts, of course, and they have different enforcement powers. Generally, they perform tariff setting functions. In some cases, they oversee service quality levels, and sometimes they're responsible for issuing licenses and contracts. And I don't want to take so much time on these details because the colleagues after me indeed will be presenting in some more details what national regulators do. Whatever the competence they have, these regulators share the same basic principles. And this is exactly the thing on which I would like to draw your attention. Principles are independence from both the public and the private sectors. Transparency of decision-making process. Decisions of these agencies indeed are very easily accessible, and they use to consult and to involve all stakeholders in decision-making process. Efficiency-driven regulatory action and cost-reflectiveness of tariff setting action. In summary, the basic feature that these 7 regulators share is the idea of applying to the waste sector the regulatory tools that the EU has been experiencing for years for, say, more advanced utility sectors, namely telecommunication, energy, water, even if we all are perfectly aware of the difficulties of such mission. The fact that we share these basic principles of regulatory actions made us aware of the fact that it was worth trying to launch a common initiative. And indeed, exactly 1 year ago, 7 independent regulators decided to join in a network. Network's objectives are more or less exchanging views and highlighting the relevant experiences in the domain of municipal waste, facilitating and disseminating the good practices with a focus on circular economy, of course, researching and studying regulatory models throughout Europe in a comparative perspective, discussing and evaluating economic, technological, and organizational consequences of implementing the circular economy package. More importantly, to make sure, together with all relevant stakeholders, that circular economy goals are reached efficiently and effectively. And this is indeed one of the reasons for which we are meeting in this webinar today. Something that I would like to stress is that membership is open. I mean, you are not required to be branded national independent regulators. We all perfectly know that the legal frameworks in member states in the European Union is very, very different. I would say that each member state has its own specificities. So, well, indeed, I think that we could have bear in mind that a regional authority, like for instance, Ministry of Environment of Bavaria in Germany, as well as the corresponding agency in the Belgian region of Flanders, are of course very much welcome to join. Well, anyone joining has actually to share the view that that regulation is a key element in reaching the circular economy objectives in an efficient and effective manner. Let's have a look in this slide at why and how. During our discussions, we, the 7 regulators, which are the founding members of the network, identified some policy requirements that indeed are very important alongside the circular economy packages. First of all, there's the polluter pays principles that is inside. Indeed, it's embedded in any of the EU's legislation.
You have 1 minute to conclude, Giovanni.
It should be enough. We saw that higher investment requirements are there. And we also saw that there is a projected shift to capital intensive and technology driven industry. Last but not least, if you plan such an important reform of the economy, you have to make sure that you have support from publics and stakeholders. We imagined indeed that for any of these requirements, you can have one or more regulatory tools that more or less reflect the regulatory principles I was talking about before, that would act as a bridge beyond the policy requirement and the policy outcomes. Well, if you have a look at what regulators do daily, when setting cost-reflective tariffs, regulation actually implements polluter pays principles. At the same time, regulator allow investors and operators to fully recover investment costs. This use should be intended to be stable over time, what brings confidence and reduces financial risks. Moreover, it should be said that neutrality of regulation, which means having the same rules for all stakeholders, helps select the most efficient operators regardless of their ownership structure. Of course, let me say that cost recovery does not mean that any cost will be covered. Regulators' major objective in the medium term is indeed to make service providers more and more efficient. That means that specific costs, to say the cost for any given level of service provided, should be decreasing over time, well, at least not increasing, of course. And this can deliver circular economy objectives at minimum costs. Finally, let me say that ensuring access to high quality services and overseeing contractual obligations result in public's confidence and makes circular economy become a shared objective for all stakeholders.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. I will right away give the floor to Lorenzo Bardelli, who is the head of the Environment Division of ARERA, which is the regulator in Italy. So Lorenzo, the floor is yours if you want to share your screen. Perfect.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for the invitation to this very interesting seminar. And instead of presenting a list of principles on which everybody could agree, I would like to present some picture of our approach to show to you how our regulatory experience has tried to implement this kind of criteria and principles. The most relevant of which is, of course, the one referring to circular economy. The presentation does not react to my demand to go on. I don't know how to.
If you use maybe your mouse, with the roll on that's on your mouse sometimes. This can do, or let me see, I'll see if I have you.
I don't know why. Let's try again to do it. No, it is blocked. Okay. Are you?
There you go. I think it's okay now.
Okay, thank you. We have found a situation in which there were two different management chains in the activities concerning waste, with a separation that was very high from sorted waste chain and mixed waste chain. And accordingly to this organization, also the tariff calculation criteria that were in use in our country considered these two kind of chains in a separated way. And also it had some relevant effects with reference to end users and also to a lot of other operators that were in charge of sorting waste or of implementing recovery activities. We have found this kind of approach in need of an evolution, because a correct implementation of circular economy principles demands for a more careful consideration of a lot of technological innovation that may can make possible that from the mixed waste chain something can be recovered or used, can come back in the circular economy, and from the sorted waste chain something has to be under a disposal activity as it was for mixed waste. And we started to consider this approach looking to the simple, some simple equation. Of course, the total cost are the sum, as it happens in everywhere in the world, of variable costs and fixed costs. In the variable costs, if you look to the tariff variable in colored with orange and colored with green, the color of the variable matter to understand the message that I would like to deliver to you. You can see that it is the value chain of the normal value chain of the waste sector. The red variables are concerns incentives, and I would like to skip this kind of details, of course. The blue variables concerns adjustments refer to previous years, and they are not of interest again in this situation. But the orange and green variables are of interest, and they indicate that we have to consider in the coverage of in the recovery of the costs for the activities of waste collection and treatment and disposal, both the costs refer to mixed and sorted waste in a common way, in a simultaneous solution, and it is under variable costs. Consider that under fixed costs we have again a green variable that is CK, that refers to cost of capital, because under the authority view, as was also stressed by Commissioner Castelli in the opening address, the infrastructure and so the cost of capital lie at the heart of the ability of the sector to recover to properly recover the waste that has been collected. Consider also that referring to cleaning streets, we have the activity of cleaning the streets. We have the orange the orange color simply because it usually refers to waste collection that is quite difficult to be recovered, even if there are experiences that allow this kind of process.
You have 1 minute to conclude, Lorenzo.
Yeah, and to conclude, I would like to show to you the final picture, that is the underlying division that underlie our approach, that is an integrated approach that considers simultaneously both sorted waste chain and mixed waste chain. And if you have time, not today, but even in the next days, you can see that looking to the different activities involved, it is possible to have many interactions among between sorted waste chain and mixed waste chain that allow us to disseminate incentives by means of a proper regulation to demand to all the operators, but also to administrative bodies, to adopt the correct decisions in order to take into considerations the need of efficiency and efficacy in the definition of their activities, and to get finally a good result for the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Very much appreciated. Now we're moving on to the last speaker of this session, Ana Albuquerque, who's an executive board member of ERSAR from Portugal. So ERSAR, which is the waste regulator in Portugal. Ana, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, Maria. I will present a brief overview of the state of the art in Portugal regarding solid waste. So in the early 19th, following the entry of Portugal into the European community, it was developed a new strategy for the sector. At that time, only 27% of waste were sent to proper destination, and the rest were sent to dump sites. It was made a deep reorganization to recover delay relative to other European countries. The separation of retail and bulk services, the division of responsibility between state and municipalities, the opening of the possibility of the participation of private capital. And in 2002, all dump sites were closed and was made a great investment in treatment infrastructures. Over the years, the evolution of waste treatment has been very significant with the reduction of the landfilling. In 2018, about 11% of the waste collected was sent to recycling, 36% is organic recovery, 20% energy recovery, and 33% is sent to landfill. This is the big numbers of Portugal nowadays. And here you can see that in Portugal, the waste collection by retail represents 4.7 million pounds per year, of which 3.9 million are mixed municipal waste and over 600,000 are selective collection. And the bulk services treat 5 million pounds of waste, which also includes waste from urban cleaning and other producers. The average charge for consumers is 59.50 euros per year. And regarding our regulatory model, the regulation model, which is currently under full implementation, witnessed a consolidation process since 2013. This model is based in two main pillars: structural and behavior regulation. The regulation must contribute to a better organization of the sector, the clarification and improvement of sector rules and legislation. And additional ERSAR, which is the regulator in Portugal, in mainland, prepares regular information and supports technically the operators. In terms of behavioral regulation, ERSAR assignment involves legal and contractual monitoring, economic, quality of service, and drinking water quality regulation and consumer interface. Two important tasks and that ERSAR is responsible is economic regulation, so setting the tariffs for the state-owned companies, and the supervision of tariffs that are set by the municipalities. And in 2014, we published waste tariff regulation that was revised in 2018. And this waste tariff regulation has previews extended regulation cycles of 3 to 5 years that increased predictability and stability of tariffs. The regulation states rules on tariff structure and calculation of revenue cap and tariffs. And this regulation was applied to state-owned multi-municipal concessions, the private management, since 2016. We are currently in the second cycle of regulation to this kind of activities. Regarding this regulation previews a revenue cap model, and for the direct management, we use clusters to define and to supervise the tariffs that are set by the municipalities. Another important role that the regulator does is the supervision of the quality of service. The quality of service is achieved by assessing utilities' performance and comparing their results within the sector. So it's benchmarking that ERSAR does every year. Regarding the waste management system, we have 16 indicators fed by 87 different data, and the quality indicators are calculated for each operator and are divided according to 3 main objectives: protection of user interests, operator sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And these are in these slides, you have the names of the 16 indicators. So we have not too much time to explain what are all the other activities that we perform under our regulatory model. These, I believe, are 2 of the most important, but it's also important to say that we also contribute to the sector organization because we are involved with the government in the production of the legislation that drives the sector. So to a summary.
Yeah, you have 1 minute to conclude.
Okay, thank you. In Portugal, we decided to implement regulation at the national level, mainland, so not including Azores. The exception are the autonomous region of Madeira and Azores, and with an integrated, holistic approach based on a global and integrated regulatory model. We want to guarantee articulation, and we guarantee this model guarantees the articulation with other relevant authorities without overlapping what we do. And also we have adopted a collaborative and pedagogic regulation and that guarantees transparency and stakeholders participation. And in summary, for 5 minutes, it's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this presentation. So I'll share with you some comments and questions. I know that Stefan also has 1 question. So first of all, I've seen, in the conversation that some of the participants would love to know more about those very simple equations. So if at some point, Lorenzo, there can be some elements, further elements that could be shared, after the webinar, I think it would be very welcome from the participants. So that's one thing. The other thing, but I think you mentioned that quite clearly in your presentation, Giovanni, was regarding the fact that this network of European waste regulator was open to all, let's say, types of regulator, no matter what is the institutional framework in each different country. So not only, I'd say, agencies, but also ministries or departments within ministries when there is a line ministry. So that was clearly mentioned, but it's just, I think it's good to underline this point. So I have one quick question for you, Giovanni, because you mentioned some, maybe it's a point of detail, but to me it's important as it might change the structure of the market and of the municipal waste sector in the future. You were mentioning some aggregation trends, which is something that we see also in the water sector. So I was wondering if you had some more information regarding that trend. Are there countries where there are incentives in place or mandatory, laws or agreements, arrangements to go towards that aggregation, or is it something that's just beginning, let's say? So that was one of my first question. The other question was more for Anna, because as you were mentioning, and as I was mentioning in my presentation, we're lacking to some extent some data, across Europe on municipal waste. But it seems that like in Portugal, that there's been a huge effort that's been done, on the collection of data, the harmonized data, and so on. So I wanted to know a little bit more about the information system that has been put in place. And before I give you the floor to answer, maybe Stefan, you had one question. So if you wanna raise it now, and then we move on to the answers.
Yes, maybe very quickly because we are running out of time. But I was wondering, especially listening to Lorenzo Bardelli's presentation, how the regulator is trying to, or is able to cope with the need for regulations, the need for incentives, and the need for flexibility, especially in this time with the COVID-19. I mean, that you've got plenty of delays with investment, that you've got new targets that are to be put in place, so new investments that were not planned before. So I was wondering how you deal with rigid equations for price, tariff, and so on, and the need to be flexible depending on the events.
Okay, so I'll ask, first of all, maybe Anna to answer because you have your mic open.
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, it's true that we recollect every year, SAS collects information from all the almost 400 operators on solid waste and also on water, but it's another. And this data, as some of the data is related with quality of service, and other data is related to economic data. And based on the data that we recollect, we produce these 16 indicators, and we do a report that the name of the report is Razar, that is in our website. And in this report, you can not only see the state of the art in the country, generally speaking, but also specific information that a benchmark between all the operators. And also for each operator, we can see the evolution of the indicators year by year. We have a guide that we have published that has all the indicators and how we calculate the indicators. This is public information. We give support to all the operators to fill the spreadsheets in our portal, and every year, based on the results of the quality assessments, we give prizes to the best operators in the sector. Of course, now we have not enough time, but I'm available if anyone wants some more explanations regarding this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. So now, Giovanni, if on the aggregation trend, quickly, of course.
Yeah, the aggregation trend is either voluntary and or mandatory. In Italy, there's a long-lasting story about aggregation of municipalities. Indeed, at the mid-90s, we had the first law that reorganized the waste management services. And it was provided in this law that municipalities could have been grouped in a mandatory way in the so-called larger area authorities. that was responsible for planning and for preparing all the regulatory tools intended to waste management in that areas. Things have been changing since then, because actually, indeed, the trend, we witnessed that there's a tendency to enlarge, to make these areas bigger and bigger. And before the government, before Italy's government and parliaments gave ARERA the powers to regulate the waste sector at national level, this larger area indeed were the regions. So the fact that ARERA is now responsible for regulating did not stop this tendency. We actually have a very complex institutional setup in which ARERA has to interact with the local and regional authorities. This is something observable in other countries too. In France, we saw this phenomenon. It's worth having a closer look at what happened in the UK, which is not unfortunately a member state any longer, but at time it was a member state. And what was happening in the UK in the first 10 to 15 years is that aggregation was not mandatory, but was made by municipalities on a voluntary basis, and was driven by the fact that municipalities wanted to share at the minimum cost possible for citizens the planning and building of disposal plants. So you have two drivers indeed: administration, say more efficient administration, and more efficient economics in running disposal and now recycling plants.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorenzo. Sorry, Giovanni, I'll ask Lorenzo to be very short, because I'm doing so bad, in time managing, that I see Stefan's going to make fun of me.
Thank you. The question of Stefan is a very interesting one, and maybe we need some more time to go in depth on that. What I can say in a few words is that we have defined our tariff methodology in the October of the 2019, so before the COVID-19 experience, and it was a mix of incentives and guarantees, as is usually in the tariff methodology throughout the world. After the pandemic, we changed the mix, introducing more guarantees and reducing the power of some incentives. This was the new regulatory basket that we have defined 1 week ago. So there was a consultation procedure, a lot of new information that was made available by the operators, and we have changed. We have introduced some mitigation effects, we call it this way, in order to consider some further guarantees to help operators to cross this difficult situation, to face this difficult situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anna, you wanted to, yeah, sure,
yes,
go ahead.
I had something that I've forgotten, I believe it's very important. We use this data and these indicators also, these indicators are used to as a criteria of eligibility to the subsidies from the European Commission to the investment. And this is very powerful. And I should also add that in Portugal, in the last 3-4 years, we have been through a process of aggregation of operators, and we have given, and the government has set some incentives for that aggregation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. I'll give the floor to Stefan. I don't know if you can hear, but there are some works in my building, so it's really terrible for me. So Stefan, please help me out.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So let's move to the next session. So we will now have a session about stakeholders' view. So I believe maybe we will talk a little bit less about regulation, a little bit more about incentive and voluntary approach by the industry, for example. I don't know. I give the floor right now to Professor Paulo Ferrao, University of Lisbon. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. So I hope I'm already sharing my presentation with you.
Perfect.
So, yeah. So first of all, I think this discussion is, of course, very timely, because we are certainly living a revolution that is taking time, but of course is now accelerated by the Green Deal and this idea of circular economy that has been already so well discussed until now. I would like to come up with some data from Portugal. So I've been very much involved in the waste management strategies in Portugal. And I would like to show you in 2018, which is the picture. So, and this reports the first destination of waste. So it's not the final destination, it's the first destination. So it means that we have 10% of the material that is recycled, like packaging, for example, 3% that goes for organic recovery directly. We have a lot of mechanical and biological treatment facilities that we inherited from past strategies. And then, of course, we have material that goes straight to energy recovery, and then 10% mechanical treatment and 33% landfill. We have been now, during the last weeks, working with the industry to draft a potential plan for Portugal, because now the draft is already been promoting officially, and look at the revolution that we need to endorse until 2030. So we need to put directly to material recycling 35% of the materials, to organic material recovery directly 31%, energy recovery 19%, mechanical treatment 15%. Of course, mechanical and biological treatment will disappear because we will collect separately the biological, so there is no more biological, so it's only mechanical. And look, landfill 0. So we, of course, need to send directly to landfill 0. Now, if you look into the right-hand table, this does not mean there is no landfill. Of course, there is landfill because there are residues which came from the different operations which are listed as first destinations. And for example, I was watching in the chat, of course, for example, we need to landfill the ashes and so on. So landfill will be 9%, and then we will fill the EU targets by adopting this strategy. But of course, this is really a revolution. So we need to have the selective collection of bio-waste, and its recovered should reach 86% of the total bio-waste produced in Portugal, which is compared to 3 that we have now. So it will be a revolution. And of course, we need to have a lot of investment in this area. And we need something which is very important. Sometimes it's not properly calculated. In order to achieve this, we need to look at the hazardous residues, bulky residues, and textiles. Textiles are very important, sometimes mislooked. So we need to recycle textiles. And of course, we need to requalify and expand all the waste infrastructures, promoting the high level of efficiency. But if I may highlight one single thing, and for me, the most important one, we need to develop downstream markets. There is no point in promoting recyclable materials if then the market cannot absorb them. And this goes for, of course, all the fluxes. And this is extremely important. For example, for the textile, at the moment I was making some inquiry, there is really no industry that can accept the material from textiles to be incorporated. And Portugal is a textile industry. So there is a lot to do in this sector. And into my opinion, this requires a very broad set of measures, as for example, to certify and regulate the content of recycled materials in the products. This has to do with advancing green public procurement in this direction. So, and again, as we started with an excellent presentation before, only an holistic perspective can result in success in this area if you want to promote this circular economy. And then just to close, of course, we need more information because we need to have information about all these streams of information. And certainly we need more harmonization in the information across Europe because, of course, each country is not going to solve its own problems when it comes to industry and incorporation, for example, of recycled materials. It's not well feasible economically. And then, of course, we need this more advanced, harmonized information across Europe so that regulators can act more effectively. And with this, I close my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 5 minutes, right on time. I believe you are the first time to respect the 5 minutes time for your speech. Let's move to the second speaker. So Piotr Barczak from Poland, the European Environmental Bureau. So Piotr is asking a lot of questions in the conversation part of the Zoom, and now he may give some answers during the presentation.
Hello, hi. Can you see? Can you hear me? And can you see the slide?
Perfectly.
Okay. Great. So yes, thank you. Indeed, I was a bit active, and a lot of very important points were already mentioned. I will bring a perspective of an NGO which I represent, which is the EEB, European Environmental Bureau. And first of all, thank you to organizers for inviting us. It's I feel very enthusiastic about academia taking the challenge and taking the more work on circular economy with Florence Law of Regulation and Sorbonne and others. I hope this will continue, and this is very important. We represent NGOs and all over Europe, probably from your countries too. And I will just have a short presentation on this. If I do this, how do you see it now? Okay, I think you see the slide. Okay, so far we've been talking about recycling as circular economy, and I just want to emphasize that this is really not only about recycling. Well, no, a few of you have mentioned the upstream solutions regarding eco-design, including also the Commission, which is great. I just want to emphasize on a few principles that I keep to repeat. Sorry if you have already heard them, but we can, it's worth reminding. It is about the definition of circular economy. Everyone has a different definition, so let's get the things right here. Because when we speak about waste challenges and waste problems, really the solution is much before than in the downstream. We have to already now acknowledge that in a few years' time, the solution to waste management will be what we put on the market now. So in this way in mind, we have to, I'm happy that the Commission is in the new Circular Economy Action Plan is really putting emphasis on eco-design, because those circles in circular economy have to be made slow, have to enlarge and make the life of products much more longer, durable. It also relates to reuse and repair, which was also one of the questions in this part. Very important, so that to extend the life after a product is used or broken. The circles have to be small or thin, I call it also, so that we don't need any superfluous waste. Even if waste is perfectly recyclable, say PET, PET, or a bio-waste, we have to already from the scratch in the system eliminate any superfluous waste. Even if it's not waste anymore, it is resources. We have to first of all put a headline on the resources use reduction, and this is also one of our NGOs' main demand here. We, by the way, we are based in Brussels, and we do work a lot with different stakeholders that have the headquarters in Brussels, including the Commission, the Parliament, and others. The circular economy has to be also local. This is about one value that should be kept with the local community. And also it is about just also taking responsibility of what we generate as a community. We should not really send any more waste outside the territory, or even worse, to Africa or Asia, where the waste is treated in a substandard way. And this is also part of the work we are doing, advocating for limitations of exports of waste. Clean circular economy, no toxic substances here. Let's take an example of PVC, which is recyclable, but really should we take the burden of costly recycling and decontamination, if rather we should take the decontamination and the clean materials challenge already in the design stage. Sustainable feedstocks, including all the materials that we use for new products. Now the topic of bioplastics also, but also in terms of energy, which energy we use to run circular economy is also important, and that is also obviously renewable sources and perpetual. And here clearly incineration, waste. I see an echo. I hear an echo. Can you please everybody mute? Thank you. So clearly here, waste incineration is so far away from circular economy because it is not perpetual. It does not keep the value of materials at all. Again, please, can anyone mute the microphone? Okay. Downcycling in this case should be avoided because it always loses the value of the material. However, downcycling is still better than incineration. And you can. yeah, quickly to the tools, economic tools. I read the report produced by some of you here regarding the capex and all the economic tools and how to finance the system. And I chosen this slide to tell you how the different economic tools should be used in the whole system of circular economy, where waste is also, of course, a big part. So starting from primary raw materials, there should be taxing on resources rather than labor. Then when it comes to products, the Commission is exploring the possibility to have harmonized approach to so-called modulated EPR fees. So where EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility System, would finance, it already does finance the waste management, not fully in some countries, that's true. It should be strengthened, and most important, it should also reflect the environmental performance of the product. So whenever product is reusable, is refillable, for example, or does look at the contamination of its materials, or is fully transparent when it comes to substances, it should receive a lower EPR fee as compared to another one that is not yet going there. So this economic tool would rather move the market to solutions that are cheaper in the end for the producers, because the EPR would be lower. The positive return system is also a way to perfectly collect waste in a separate way. Some waste can be collected this way. Green certificates, also different green public procurement schemes, labels, eco labels. Oh, 1 minute to conclude. So taxing, of course, incineration and landfilling. Important taxing incineration is important along landfilling, not only landfilling. Different ways to separately collect waste in a better way, in order to reduce the overall consumption generation of waste, which is a pay-as-you-throw. And then, as somebody said about market absorption and downstream markets, tax rebates for the use of secondary raw materials is very important. You may know that in a few days there will be 5th of July, there will be a deadline for member states to transpose waste directives, and most of them are late. I just want to invite you to check our website here, where you find a timeline on what the countries should do in the coming years. We have also produced this material on how the next waste thinking should really focus on prevention. And then there is also this material that you can find, one of them, there are more, you can find practical examples of how to implement waste prevention laws in your countries and the regions and cities. And here I just, thank you for that. I'm happy to discuss more, and please get in touch through here, email, phone, or Twitter. Thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very clear presentation. I propose to move to the last speaker, Michael Mansoui, Head of Public Affairs from Veolia.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to share my screen right now. Can you see it?
Perfect.
Great. So yeah, my presentation today is about how we can make recycling work in Europe and the challenges we face at the moment. So just a brief presentation of Veolia. That's one of the few large companies Maria was referring to. We have 3 types of business lines: water, waste, and energy, and I'm in charge of public affairs for the waste business line. So I usually deal with regulation. In terms of what I would present today, we have 4 main challenges. There is a background noise.
I know. Could you switch off your mic, all of you, if you are not speaking, because this is why I believe.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So the 4 challenges is how we can make recycling profitable. First of all, how can we move towards quality recycling, which is an issue, an industrial issue? How can we deal with waste shipment and the de facto ban we have at the moment? And what do we do with residues also? So first of all, how can we create more demand for recyclates? We are very happy to see voluntary commitment at European level, all the pledges, 10 million tons. But we would like to see more binding recycled content, as they are enshrined in the Single-Use Plastic Directive. We think it's possible for different products, and it should go beyond PET bottles, actually. In terms of incentives, the current brainstorming at European level is very positive for us, because we think plastic tax, as seen in different member states, VAT, recycling certificates, or also how to reward avoided emissions. Also the eco-modulation of fees, as already mentioned by Piotr. We think they all could be interesting, but there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. And we have to tailor them to very specific materials and also markets. So I'm talking a lot about plastics, but we should take paper and cardboard into account also. The current momentum should be clearly sustained, and we're very happy to see what's in the European Circular Action Economy Action Plan, and also what member states do, I mean, at national level. The second challenge we face at the moment is how to move towards quality recycling. And here I'm talking mainly about contaminants and legacy substances. It has been mentioned already, better collection is key, of course, and better designing product, eco-design and recyclability will be very important also. But treating hazardous waste and substances should be the overarching principle of it. Decontamination and non-dilution should prevail no matter what. And the classification we have at the moment should be based on hazard assessment. And we're not in favor of any risk-based approach, to be honest. Also, we think as a guiding principle, recycled materials should be as good as virgin material. Of course, in some very specific cases, we might need some kind of flexibility for certain uses if we want to keep recycling, but that's a trade-off. Sometimes, as Piotr just said, it's better to dispose or incinerate the material. So that's a trade-off, and it has to be decided beforehand. Also, there is a debate at the moment between different technologies, especially at European level, because what we have right now is mechanical recycling. It's cheap and efficient, but it has limitations, especially in terms of food grade for plastic, for instance. We see chemical recycling emerging, but at the moment it needs to be thoroughly assessed because we're not sure it's that good from an economic and environmental point of view. And another issue is biodegradable plastics, which some stakeholders try to push, but we have a hard time recycling them, and we can't really compose them as well. So it's really, it should be seen as a contaminant. Third issue is how to navigate the geopolitics of waste, because we know at the moment we had this 2018 Chinese world policy. So we have a de facto ban on shipping plastics and paper to Asia. So we have to rethink the whole way we ship waste. Also the amendment to the Basel Convention that has been tabled by Norway. And we will have a future revision of the waste shipment regulation. So now we have three blocks, the EU, the OECD, and the rest of the world. And we think it's good to relocate recycling industry in Europe because we can reach the quality I was mentioning before. But also we should differentiate between different types of waste. First of all, hazardous waste, Basel Convention, that's it. For non-hazardous waste, then we need a fluid market within Europe and possibly within the OECD and even beyond if needed. Clearly for disposal, proximity and self-sufficiency principle should be key and should be enforced. For waste energy, it's a tricky question, we shall see. Sometimes we need fluidity and sometimes we don't. And the last issue, I hope I'm on time, is how to treat non-recyclable waste. It's a bit controversial, I know that. And there is no debate at EU level on waste energy whatsoever. It's really like shouting in the desert. But we think there is a potential in refuse-derived fuels, and this potential should be tapped into. But of course, this would require investment and political will. But when it comes to investment, what we see is less funding at the moment, regional funds, and also the fact that this is not included in the taxonomy as a green activity might hinder future investment in this technology. I hope I'm on time and I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. So it is time for question and answer. We've got, let's say, 5 minutes because we are running out of time because of Maria, needless to say. I know that Germain, you wanted to react concerning the presentation. You can open your mic if you want. Germain, the floor is yours.
Yeah, huh? Hello, do you hear me?
Perfectly well.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to make a kind of a short speech, not even a speech, I promise. Second, I think my camera is not working, so I can see you, but you cannot see me. You don't lose much anyway, so that's okay. I didn't need to dress up, etc. And then I will make just 3 remarks. One, I'm not a real expert on the type of issues that have been discussed, but I want to make 3 remarks. First of all, which is a kind of general meta remark, I do not believe in zero nothing. Zero waste, zero risk, zero pollution, zero wars. Perfection does not exist, and public policy sometimes tries to reach perfection, which is only expending energy and resources, but perfection is not met. So I will say that zero anything is not a very challenging or appealing lemma. Might be good for lobby. This is my next point, but it's not very appealing because most people do not believe in perfection. At least, well, in Central Northern Europe. Southern Europe is more type of Platonic society, so might work. So second, then when you're looking for a zero something, and this involves great opportunities like the new Green Deal in Europe, which is a kind of a promise of a manna, a rain of millions of euros investing in opportunities, etc. This is also a big challenging thing because all the things you have been discussing will end up funding investments, huge investments, with technological consequences. And this will end up creating lobby activity. So in 2015, 2017, I was a chair of the Committee of Environment of the Regional Parliament of Catalonia. Didn't know very much about the topic, but I was chairing the Committee for Environment. And I remember very well how a glass recycling company was lobbying me because they didn't want a law allowing reusing of glass being passed because they had made so much investments that they could not lose the market. So the point was the rate of return of the investment rather than environmental sustainability. So in all projects being designed at this point, because technology changes so much, heavy, hard investments and subsidies for heavy, hard investments perhaps should be avoided. Third and last one, very short. I think that there are so many things we still don't know. In next session, Professor Gradus will speak, right? And Professor Gradus has a great paper published in Ecological Economics that shows that all taken together, for many types of plastics, he will correct me if I'm wrong, transforming energy, which is the politically correct way to say, is more efficient in fighting pollution than recycling. Well, it all depends on whether you focus on the output or you focus on the life cycle balance. I'm not sure we still know very much about the current trade-offs as to learn very much about the new ones. And I myself feel, and for sure society at large will benefit from having more knowledge on the combination of outputs and sustainable policies also in waste management and outputs and overall balance of different technologies and tools, because this would be very interesting, and I'm closing with this, also in trying to understand when a demand is a lobby demand, specifically private interest, or is a well combined public and private interest. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your comments. We've got very few time for the question and answer time. Would you like to react, or somebody wants to ask questions? I've got 2 comments to make before the end of the session. Maybe I will make my 2 comments and then you just conclude in 1 minute if you want. Okay. Just to react on your presentation, I was very interested by the 3 presentation, of course. Could you switch off your mic for those who are not online? Okay, taking the floor. So yes, first of all, I was very interested by all the presentation. I just hear that there is a huge challenge for being able to reach the objective for 2030. It was the first presentation, challenge, a revolution. And you mentioned the fact that we need for various sectors to be interconnected, so kind of sector coupling issues. So I was just wondering how you regulate sectors that are coupled together when you've got several sectors that may be regulated differently by different regulators or by the same regulator with some different rules. And it might even more increase the complexity of the regulation and increase the complexity of the work for stakeholders and companies. So I wonder how you deal with that. And I have in mind this National Audit Office report coming from UK 2019, where they were pointing out the fact that many regulators, if not every regulators in the UK, were unable to state clearly what are their objectives, and they were not accountable enough in front of the customers, in front of the citizens, and that's why there is a loss of confidence in regulators. So I was just thinking about if you've got some sector coupling and objectives that are very complex to define and to follow, how do you restore confidence, or how can you be sure that the confidence will be here? Also, I was thinking about, it is another comment concerning the presentation. I'm really interested by the incentive part of the story, incentives for consumers. So pay as you throw, for example, is a very interesting part for an economist like me. But I was thinking about all the data you need to implement this at the individual level, at the household level. At the household level, this is not so easy to implement. And I was thinking also, because I know it exists, about some other kind of incentives that are less clear for me, but kind of educational games, family games that are played in order for household to understand how to reduce their consumption and their waste that are put in place by operator. I was wondering if you see this as an experiment and something that might develop or not. And that's it for my comments, because I don't want to run too much out of time. So maybe you can take 1-2 minutes, every of you, just to react on what you want, and then we'll move to the last session. First is Paolo. You want to react first?
Yes, thank you. I do, certainly. Thank you for your summary, very clear. So what I think is that it's really a challenge, for example, in Portugal, as you have mentioned. We need to make a huge effort on collection, and collection is often responsibility of municipal authorities. And then we have systems which gather a lot of municipal authorities that process the waste. So we really need to find out ways to be sure that this works together, because otherwise the success of one depends on the other. So we are very happy that our regulator is working with the data, and we will need certainly more data. And then just a word with a lot of sympathy. So I didn't say, but of course I'm from a university, and we are now starting 2 major projects. One is on pay as you throw, and the incentives to try to make a pilot project with different incentives to the population. So, and also another project on gaming. So and basically serious gaming, I would say, like a digital twin for the waste system in Portugal. So we are going to make a big model so that the people understand which is the impact of their actions in the overall waste management processing. And I hope this might work. So yes, indeed. So I guess that during the next months and years, we will be able to promote this and to make it available. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can share quickly. On your question, Stefan, about pay-as-you-throw, there is a lot of data already. There is a lot of reports done on this by ACR+. I think if we fall in the trap of asking for more and more data, then we never do. We need action. Your education idea, I strongly believe in regulation. It was said already here, more than education. However, if gaming is part of a system to improve separate collection, why not? But education as gaming, families, kids, this is not where we have to put our attention. And thank you, Germa, moltas gracias for your remarks. First of all, just on zero waste. Honestly, personally, I don't care if you believe or not in zero waste. This is not about believing. This is a strategic question. We have to take the aim very high and very ambitious. In 2008, when the Waste Framework Directive was decided, nobody believed in 50% recycling. Today, we achieve in some regions, 50% recycling. Next, 65. We are going into that direction, and this is the aim, and this is what zero waste makes us the main aim high. But on your second point on lobbying, I very much agree with this, and this is precisely what is happening in Brussels also. And here I can answer to Michel Mansouri from Volia that his company is also represented here by different stakeholders, lobbying stakeholders. Exactly what are they doing? They are trying to preserve the ability to build and more of heavy, difficult, and infant facilities such as incinerators to create, that will create this lock-in effect, unfortunately, where else the ambition of circular economy should be really somewhere else. And on your last point, Stefan, LCA, no, that was Germa also, and I think the next professor will address that. LCA of different materials, when it comes to recycling them, is not always taking into account of what is the LCA of non-properly addressed materials. For example, pollution. And that's why always it is more important to recycle, to collect rather than dispose. And if the LCA indeed, a true LCA will be not in favor of those, then materials should be replaced or phased out gradually, because never incineration is better than recycling, in my view. But yeah, thanks for that.
Well, I hope I made clear that recycling is a priority even for Veolia. I think that was the whole point of my presentation. And I think in order to do that, we need to incentivize recycling. And as a company, my favorite tool is binding minimum recycled content, because it creates demand. And if there's no market, there's no recycling happening. That's my main message for today. Then, of course, we have to face some trade-offs for specific materials. And you're right, Piotr, sometimes we have to make difficult decisions. But what we need as a business is visibility. That's why we need regulation. We need people to tell us what we should, could, or could not do with specific materials. This is what we expect from people. That's why the work on the interface between chemicals, product, and waste legislation is so important, because we think when a substance is classified as hazardous, authorities have to tell us if we can recycle it, if we have to get rid of it. That's what we expect from them. And I also would like to say that I've been working in Brussels for 15 years, between Paris and Brussels. Everybody's a lobby, everybody. So we all push our different interests. And I think it's very healthy in a democracy that everybody can be listened to and understood. That's my conclusion.
Thank you very much. A good conclusion to conclude this session. We will move to the last session that will be moderated by Maria. Maria,
yes,
are you there? Okay.
Absolutely, and I'll give the floor right away to Professor Raymond Gratus from Amsterdam Vrije University. Professor, the floor is yours.
Yes, you see my presentation?
No, you have to share your screen.
Okay, yes, I know how to share screen. Yes, now you see it?
Yes, absolutely, thank you.
Okay, well, Okay, yes. Okay, the European Union advocates a plastic waste recycling rate of more than 55%. Even for the Netherlands, which has already invested heavily in recycling, it still will be a challenge to meet this target. Currently, half of plastic waste is separated in the Netherlands. The preferred solution to reach this target is implementing collection schemes at the curbside or bring locations nearby schools. Interestingly, some municipalities in the Netherlands have invested in post-collection of plastic waste since 2013. Plastics are collected with mixed waste streams and separated in a factory. In an article forthcoming in Environmental Research and Economics, Albert Dijkgraaf and I show that post-collection separation is a good alternative with an increased separation of plastic waste compared with home separation. On average, post-separation gives yearly 8.5 kilograms per inhabitants, which is 3 to 5 kilograms more than curbside collection. Post-separation is even slightly above home separation if it's combined with a unit-based pricing system for unsorted waste and pay-as-you-throw system. We all know that unit-based pricing can be effective in stimulating recycling, but it can have serious drawbacks as administrative cost and illegal dumping. Moreover, post-separation can have some other advantage as well. There is evidence that the quality of the recycled plastic waste is better in case of post-separation than by home separation. In a study by colleagues of Wageningen University, it's shown that post-separation generates lower polymeric contamination of sorted waste as PET, PE, PP, and other plastic streams than home separation. PS is post-separation and HS is home separation. As also this figure is showing. Due to this lower contamination, the revenues of second-hand plastics are higher. A serious problem of home separation of plastic waste is the low quality. In the Netherlands, still 25 till 30% is burned and another 30% is exported. To put it in another way, post-separation avoids the separate collection of low-quality mixed plastics, which normally are burned or shipped to Asia. We all know that some parts of these shipped waste are dropped in the ocean as well. In addition, the cost of cleaning collection points or collecting curbside containers for plastic waste is avoided as well, although an investment in post-separation machine is needed, but this is only once. Although this evidence is lacking for the Netherlands, based on foreign studies, it can be shown that post-separation is much cheaper. Some environmental groups stress the importance of home separation as it creates an awareness effect. Especially unit-based pricing of unsorted waste can be important as it creates an incentive which may lead to consumers to buy goods with less packaging material. However, unit-based pricing can have also a negative effect on the motivation of people to sort waste. There is an increasing literature that for some people, intrinsic motivation erodates due to these price effects. In an empirical investigation for a town in the Lofoten in Norway, Heller and Vath show that more than half of the people behave in that direction. The environmental and resource paper adds to the literature as it is the first to test if there is an awareness effect for plastic packaging. although the test is only indirect. We test the interaction effect of post-separation with unit-based pricing. As this effect is non-significant, this gives an indication that the awareness effect of such a system on the reduction of plastic waste is non-existing. To sum up, post-separation of plastic waste is a considering alternative for home separation. An increasing number of Dutch municipalities changed to post-separation or announced to do so, as Amsterdam and Utrecht. Interestingly, for Rotterdam, which stopped at end 2019 with home separation, there is evidence that the amount of plastic is 10 times higher with post-separation, 10 times higher. So to come back to the EU policy, my conclusion is that the EU target will only be in reach at the moment that more municipalities choose post-separation of plastic waste. And in my last slide, I have some background for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Unfortunately, Valérie Plaine-Maison, who's the General Secretary from the European Federation of Waste Management Companies and Environmental Services, couldn't join us because today this is the General Assembly of this federation. So obviously she was due to attend this General Assembly, so she's not able to join us and to make the presentation. But I know that there are some members of FEAD, so of this federation, that are attending the webinar. So to some extent, you know, FEAD is still with us today. The magic of it is that it allows us to catch up a bit of time. So I'll go right away to Vania Veras, who is the General Secretary from Municipal Waste Europe. And Vania, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Just give me a second to share my screen. There we go. All right. I hope you can all hear me. So I've kept my presentation hopefully to 5 minutes. Maybe I've got another couple of minutes as Valérie was not able to join. So I'm timing myself as I tend to talk. So just to start, I started in waste management myself in 1999 actually. And during that time I have worked both with private and public waste operators. So our approach, or my approach, is to improve waste management as a whole and get us closer to a circular economy and a carbon neutral Europe. And this is what we strive for as Municipal Waste Europe as well. So a bit of background, Municipal Waste Europe has 17 members from 18 countries. We have 2 members from Austria. The Italian member is Utilitalia, as we are speaking to an Italian audience in principle today. Our members are European municipalities and their waste management companies, principally aggregated at national level in organizations such as Utilitalia, but we also have individual municipalities in some countries where such national associations don't exist. Our approach is that municipal waste is the responsibility of municipalities, and that this is a service of general interest. So in the background of our discussion, we need to keep that in mind, that this service is in the interest of every citizen, and they have the right to have their waste collected, not only to have their streets clean and for hygienic reasons, but in line with existing European legislation. As we're members of Europe, and the current legislation has to be implemented by 5th of July, that means national legislation as well. So, as I said, we represent public responsibility for waste, and we are committed to sustainable waste management, which promotes resource efficiency and a circular economy. Okay, I have squeezed everything I want to say into 2 slides. which I can't actually see on full screen, but okay, I can see enough.
We see them on our side.
You can see them, good. Right, so the new waste package, well, if we focus on the Waste Framework Directive, sets ambitious recycling targets. Now, these recycling targets include reuse. These need to be met by 2025, 2030, 35, and I include 2050 as well, because part of an integrated waste management system which responds to these recycling targets and landfill targets is climate neutrality, which we are all striving for in all sectors. Part of achieving separate collection and recycling targets is coordination. We cannot look at waste management as an isolated sector or procedure, because it depends, as others have already said, on the upstream production process and on the post-collection process, which is sorting and recycling, at least as a first step. I won't mention prevention now, maybe we'll have time later. In order to be able to have an effective, cost-efficient collection system of the dry recyclable materials, but also of bio-waste, those materials under extended producer responsibility must be encased or enshrined within a system of open, transparent coordination and cooperation with the producer responsibility organizations, the producer. If this doesn't happen, and where this doesn't happen today throughout Europe, we can see that there is much less efficiency in the separate collection system, both in terms of quality and in terms of quantity. So that's what I'll say on extended producer responsibility now, but I think that it is something which a waste agency does need to pay considerable attention to. As we have said in the past as Municipal Waste Europe, we consider that a national level in every member state should mediate and monitor the implementation of extended producer responsibility. Investment we've talked about. Here I'll just say that basically separate collection happens in a fragmented way, and there is not much room for maneuver there because it has to happen in localities. You cannot have a European level, or it's difficult to have a European level collection company or even a national level collection company, because there will be smaller companies and they do have a right to have access to market to collect. What's important there is to make sure that they are licensed and that they have that they are delivering the material to an appropriate waste treatment facility. Harmonization of waste tariffs. This is on the table in many member states. It's important that, as the calculation method was shown to us by the Italian waste agency, it's important that the waste tariffs cover the waste treatment needs, collection right through to the end of treatment. But it's also important that they refer directly to the waste treatment and not to a abstract such as square meters of household, for example. Within this system, pay-as-you-throw has been proven in many localities and member states to be a very useful tool. It's not the only tool, but it is one which we do support as Municipal Waste Europe because it has proven to be successful. When looking at what waste the citizen or the waste producer pays for, we are looking at residual waste in the main and bio waste because there is no producer that can pay for that. The producer needs to intervene according to the Waste Framework Directive Article 8A4A with an obligation to pay 80% of the collection costs. So this is something that waste agencies need to keep in mind when coming up with the waste tariffs and their calculation methods. This leads directly to the next statement, which is that quality collection is the key to successful recycling. The clearer the separate collection system is, the better the quality and the quantity of the collected material. At this point, I really must respond to the previous presenter, who is advocating for post-collection separation. The Netherlands has a specific type of collection system where there are many different types of separately collecting dry recyclables and also food waste. So where there is post-collection separation, this is not like, let's say, southern countries in the EU, because the bio-waste in those cases, the food waste, has been separated beforehand, which makes it much easier to get a quality recyclable out of that post-collection separation. So we must pay great attention to that discussion and not apply it to the whole of Europe without understanding what it means. Then we come to the aspect of investment and the question of upscaling small to medium-sized or micro companies. And here we need to focus on the actual treatment. This is possible and it's also desirable. So we can talk about putting a lot of that funding into upscaling sorting plants, bringing them also closer to areas of high production of waste for sorting and recycling, and also recycling plants. Now, this is an opportunity to invest in low-income regions. Just an example, there is no point in having a PET recycling plant in every member state or in every region. Of course, it depends on the size of the member state, so I'll say in every region. In order to achieve economies of scale, which is the same in every sector, it would be best to look at Europe as a whole and decide on the basis of feedstock and usability, so which countries use the output of that recycling plant, and also based on low-income regions, so that economic improvements are brought to those as well as job creation, and then decide where those recycling plants are going to be built. This, I think, would be an extremely good outcome of the Circular Economy Action Plan and also the Green Deal, which is aiming both at environmental innovation and improvement and also social improvements.
You have 1 minute to conclude.
Thank you. So, looking at what our waste is, 40 to 60% of municipal solid waste is food waste. The North has less food waste, let's say 40% is in the summer, the north of Europe. But in the South, because of the diets, in the summer, that goes up to 60%. So 40% in the winter and up to about 60% in the summer. Just separating food waste out of the mixed waste, collecting it separately, which is an obligation by 2027 anyway, and it's counted as the input weight to a composting or an anaerobic digestion plant, will get to 60% recycling in countries which are very far away from that today. So this is something which must be focused on, separate collection of the food waste followed by composting or anaerobic digestion. Linking that up again to the European Green Deal, which mentions soil remediation and organic agriculture, there is a client. So focusing on food waste gives you not only your recycling target, or goes a long way towards giving you your recycling target, but also has a market. This has been mentioned. It is a touchy subject, but it must be mentioned. High quality sorting and recycling has residues which are non-recyclable, and these must be treated. We are all striving towards a circular economy, but we're not going to get there tomorrow. Hopefully we'll manage within 10 years, but it's something which we are risking. So we do need waste to energy to treat that. The question with waste to energy is, in areas where there is no waste to energy today, capacity of planned incineration plants is the key to achieving any progress in such discussions. As mentioned before, the regional funds and the sustainable taxonomy for financing does not allow investment in waste to energy at the moment. So this is a discussion which does need to be followed on, but where there is waste to energy, this is a very valid option for treating residues and a much better option than putting it straight in landfill.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Vanya. I'll have to really ask you to wrap it up.
Okay. Last point: subsidies. We need to subsidize to prioritize EU recyclates. So subsidize what recyclates are produced in the EU, put tariffs on imports of primary or secondary raw materials, and I agree with Piotr, we need to move taxation from labor to materials. Thank you very much. That's all.
You've been so quick, I didn't have time to swallow my glass of water. Thank you very much, Vanya. Right away, I'll give the floor to Professor Walter Ganappini for a quick reaction on those presentations. Professor Ganappini, you have the floor.
Honored to be with you. First, I quite agree. Regulation will play a crucial role in building up the new needed MSW management sector, who has to be coherent with the priorities established by the EU's Green Deal, firstly as regards the circular economy. I think we could underline, as many speakers have done, that an investment flow will be devoted in a frame of public-private partnership also to the in order to reach the expected conservative objectives in terms of innovation, challenge, dialogue with the industrial and entrepreneurial culture, and to research and development sector too, as concerns the new products design from LCA to the environmental product declaration, in order to promote their maintenance, repair, recycling, and so on. In my opinion, because the waste management is a matter at high technical content level, we could ask the EU's offices to implement the briefs dedicated to the MSW treatment technologies in terms of best available technologies, in technical guidelines that make more effective the policy management. The decarbonization-oriented MSW scheme has to be part of a systemic governance scheme of a limited resources cycle. I quite agree with many of the speakers that has quoted the remanufacturing need in order to locate in Europe important industrial settlements, innovative settlements. ARERA, as you know, has carried out important work, as Lorenzo Bardelli has shown, in order to develop a consistent and transparent regulation, in order to pave the way for new investments, a new, better governance cycle, a smarter circular economy services as regards waste treatment. I strongly, I quite agree with the speakers that has said how the citizens and communities has to be active part involved in the circular challenge. Their active participation implies their right to know what they are paying for and how the MSW cycle can effectively favor minimization, recovery, and recycling. From this point of view, I'm absolutely convinced that a smart city with smart services, also in the field of waste management, has to be a city rich of communities in terms of community science, citizen science. We have to communicate, to involve in order to have the most effective participation.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Let me only say,
yeah,
the word to me is, as regards Europe, European Union, is harmonization. Harmonization, and we need to know very well as quantity and quality of flows, waste, tracking them in order to prevent also the negative ghost actor, intruder, that is the criminal economy. We have to track the flows in a very strong and reliable way in order to prevent and in order to contrast the eco-mafia phenomenon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ganapini. I know that Antonio Massaruto also had some reactions. So Antonio, the floor is yours. Unfortunately, as you can see, we're running out of time. I can't even say how much running out of time we are. So we're not able to show you slides, unfortunately. I really apologize for that. But the floor is yours for your comments and inputs.
Okay, very quickly, my slides will be available for you, for the participants after all, if they like to have a look on them. Okay, I think that we must reconcile what Piotr Barjak and others have said about the circular economy. It is obviously not about waste. It is about the end of waste. Its ultimate aim is to abolish the need, to eliminate the need to deal with waste. But unfortunately, this is a war that will be won, if it will, in a very, very long term. So it means that waste management as a public service will continue to remain. And what is relevant to notice here is that adopting this new paradigm about the circular economy poses dramatic challenges to the organization of the waste management industry and also to the regulation of this industry. As a regulatory economist, I would say that prior to saying that an industry needs a regulation, we need to demonstrate that it cannot run in a competitive way. And this is an utility whose features are rather different from those from network utilities. Maria has emphasized this in her speech this morning. This is not a network service. This is very open to competition in most of its part. But what's relevant here is that the new public service obligations that arise from the circular economy make it less and less suitable for competition in the market and require a careful intervention of regulatory authorities and so on. Just to to list the main issues that for me are relevant. We have learned from Lorenzo Bardelli, from the Portuguese authority as well, what regulators are doing. I think that there are many other challenges that are not still in the horizon of regulation, but need to be dealt with. The first one concerns the space of what we mean with public service. Public service is nowadays concerned with municipal waste, but we also have a special waste that is three times higher. And the distinction between special waste and urban waste is every day less clear. And perhaps the circular economy makes this difference even less clear, since there are too many linkages between the two worlds. These two worlds in the past were separate and could live apart from each other. Nowadays, the rule is the reciprocal contamination. So to me, the distinction between special waste and urban waste needs to be reconsidered. Perhaps the public service should deal not anymore with urban waste, but with ultimate waste, which is the waste that cannot be valorized anymore, whatever its origin, while waste valorization is necessarily to be put on the market. Since waste management, however, is needed still for many years, for many decades, even after the circular economy targets will be achieved, this means that we have to deal with a world in which some core facilities will be needed in order to guarantee that there is a match between ultimate waste and the capacity to treat them. Will it be waste to energy or something else? I don't know, but we need to be very careful in identifying these core facilities. There is perhaps a similarity with the electricity industry here to take advantage of. In the electricity industry as well, we want to maximize renewables, we want to maximize energy efficiency, we wish to maximize energy recovery from anything else, but we still need baseline capacity to match the system and to match demand with supply. So in the waste sector, we have a similar problem. So we need to think perhaps at capacity payment institutes for making core facilities financially sustainable. Finally, one last point concerns the role of competition in the market. As I said, this is a sector in which, in principle, there are no economic obstacles to competition. Collection is very suitable for competitive tendering. Disposal can be very easily open to the market, at least if we consider the territorial scale large enough. The Netherlands are a very good example of an internal market in which different facilities compete for different waste flows. They have no self-sufficiency principle planning waste destinations as we have in Italy or in Germany and so on. The point is that this clashes dramatically against other kinds of targets that do not arise from the economics, but arise from public order, arise from social acceptability, arise from the difficulty of managing waste flows across borders, and so on. So there is a very clear trade-off here. Walter Ganapini has mentioned a point that should never be obliviated or forgotten. The China ban has shown very clearly the drawbacks of what I call the recycling Talibanism. That is, I am a fan of recycling as well. I am aware of the European targets, but I also think that we should not push recycling too far. Economics, as Germain Bell has said, is not about clear-cut choices. Is this better than that one? But about choices at the margin. So the real point is how far can we push towards a certain kind of a solution, and how much we still need to rely on the other.
Antonio, I'm sorry.
I have finished.
Okay.
As I promised, I'll send my presentation, and it will be available for those who want to have a closer look to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I have the role of the bad guy, you know, which is fine with me. As you can see, Chiara from the Florence School of Regulation has put on the conversation a menu, the link to which you'll be able to get the presentations, you know, once we've gathered everything. Without further ado, obviously, we're moving on to the concluding words, and I'm giving the floor to José Roque Diaz del Castillo from the Waste Management and Secondary Materials Unit from the DG Environment at the European Commission. So, José Roque, sorry, the floor is yours then.
Good morning. You see me well? Very good. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this webinar. Thank you all to organizers. And I believe this webinar is aims at public regulators. And as public regulators, you have a lot of power to improve the waste management systems, especially at the municipal level, which is the administrative body closest to the citizens. So in particular, I'm very fond of economic instruments, and you have a lot of power there, and I think they should be used wisely. Something has already been said on this specific topic, but I'm bringing you five messages related to this. So the first one is, what is the aim of the economic instrument and how to apply it wisely? So first of all, the idea behind it is to reverse the waste hierarchy pyramid. Now tip it over, and the wider base of the pyramid now should be taken over by more waste prevention and the sequence, the other tiers by product reuse and recycling, and ultimately have a more positive impact on the environment and human health. So that's the first message. Secondly, I would like to point out that the economic instrument to be effective have to have 5 properties. So it has to be visible. We need to know as house owners, we need to know how much we pay for the waste we generate. Unfortunately, sometimes we have this hidden cost in the bill. We don't have a clue how much we are paying as polluters. Secondly, it has to be transparent. So the citizens should know what the municipality goals in terms of environmental impacts are and what is behind this payment. And here, let me plug our fantastic environmental management system for local authorities, the EMAS system, because at the end of the day, it's a matter of communication as well to the citizens. So don't take us for fools and just ask for money for waste. We need to know where that money goes. Thirdly, it has to be effective in order to attain the goals in a certain given time. It has to be efficient, and by that I mean in doing what is supposed to say, what it says on the tin about these economic instruments. You shouldn't tax the environment otherwise. So I have the example of having different collectors coming to the same street to get the waste, for example. And finally, it should be reinvestable. Economic instruments brings money to the coffers of the administration, and that money should be reinvested in environmental projects, in improving the environmental management. Now, all in all, we need to avoid paradoxical situations like, and happening actually in the same country, like for example, Sicily versus Treviso. The former charges citizens double than Treviso for a management systems that bring, for an environmental management system, waste management system, I wanted to say, that practically brings the waste to landfills. I mean, this is very nonsensical, it's very paradoxical, whereas in Treviso you have a very robust system for separate collection, hence quite a healthy figure in terms of recycling. My third message is the following. Sorry. Hello? Yes. So it's the following. Well, with the first Circular Economy Action Plan, 2015, where the Commission clearly turned a corner. We're not looking back now, it's clear. As a consequence, we had the revision of the waste legislation in 2018. And now with the Circular Economy Action Plan number 2, we're not only reinforcing those messages, but also we're bringing somebody else into the party, which is we want to do more waste prevention, we want to reuse products, and we want to be serious about this. So waste hierarchy matters. And the new Waste Framework Directive, as a result of this, sets as mandatory in waste management plans that member states shall make use of economic instruments, leaving the choice of such instruments to the competent authorities. And there is a list of examples in Annex 4A. So as usual, the Commission shows the way, and member states choose the path and the subsidiarity principles. It's up to them to choose those economic instruments and do it in a smart way. My fourth message is that economic instruments shouldn't be perceived as sticks only. I mean, it's a carrot and stick tool. They should incentivize clean, green purchases. And obviously, as I've been saying, it should deter waste management at the bottom of the waste hierarchy. And I can think as a very powerful economic instrument, the landfill tax, as proven in best member states' performers, they have a very meaningful tax. We're not asking for the moon, because if you reach too high, you may end up with illegal dumping somewhere else. So, but it should be scalable, it should be progressive, but it should be meaningful. And in any case where incineration exists, it should be higher than incineration, in line with the waste hierarchy. Also, pay-as-you-throw has been mentioned, and here we have different ways about it. We can charge per weight, we can charge per volume of waste generated in the house. It's an incentive for separate collection, it's an incentive for reduction of mixed waste. So clearly, it's also a winning horse here. Has been mentioned as well, the extended producer responsibility. Here we have also these kind of dichotomies in the EU. We have produced reports or studies in the past which shows that very costly EPR actually doesn't bring the expected results in the market. So here we have to be cost effective. We have to modulate in order to incentivize eco-production or eco-products. And we have to be very transparent in doing EPR. We just published a study on EPR guidance, which is a follow-up of Article 8 that Vanges just mentioned before me. Now, on the green side, it's not only about, as I said, stick, but we have the carrot. I mean, public authorities have to use their power when they purchase. So green public procurement is a very powerful tool. And also there were wise and smart use of EU funds. So to put them, those funds towards the right type of installation and the right type of scheme underpinning the waste hierarchy. Final message is that we need to learn from each other, and the new Article 38 of the Waste Framework Directive brings into play exchange of best practices in a number of issues, including economic instruments. So, I mean, we have been doing this for a while with some of the stakeholders I have recognized here today in the webinar. We will continue doing that. And certainly we need to pass the right messages. We need to be like a heat exchanger here. So what is done in one member state we consider, which is a best practice, we can facilitate this work and pass it on, pass the right messages to all the member states which are struggling in improving the waste management systems. Voila. So this is all from me. I hope I kept the time, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Very much appreciated. We'll close this this webinar with quick words, obviously, from Fabio Tambone, who's the head of external international relations in ARERA, so the Italian waste regulator, but of course regulator of other sectors as well. And following Fabio, Stefan will officially close the webinar. So Fabio, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope you hear me. Thank you very much. First of all, I start from what our colleague from the European Commission has mentioned. Let's say that there is, it's about transparency. Transparency brings many actions that we need to pursue in the next years. Transparency means a good regulation, stable rules, good attitude, good approach from operators and from all stakeholders. Secondly, I think that from what we have heard from the European Commission, OECD, we have a big challenge in the next 5-10 years to, let's say, revert the trend from 35% recycling to even 70, 60, 70. So this is a big challenge. It means that we have to really change approach. For this, we need the help of European regulators, national regulators, operators. We need to really work all together. And I think the example of today is a key example where all together we can stay in the same table and reflect and try to find common actions, even keeping in different places, to really help the change. Third, just to Vania Veras, it's not true that it's an Italian event. It's a good opportunity for Italy because there is now a representative of Italy in the European Commission, having been the responsible for waste department. Then we have Oriana, which is in OECD. So it's just a good, a good combination, but is nothing. It's really European. Third, I really want to thank Maria, Stefan, Chiara, because I think this event was not possible without them, and I really thank everyone for participating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabio. So the last word will go to Stefan. I just have to mention that I'm a fake Italian because actually, although my name is Italian, I'm French. So
exactly.
I'm not on the Italian side, if I'm Italian team, if I may say, on the French team, which can be an issue during the final of the Football World Cup.
Well, just a few words to thanks everybody, and especially the participants today. It was a very exciting webinar from my point of view. I learned a lot, and I learned that we need to think carefully about how to regulate municipal waste. And there is plenty of challenge for regulators. Think about smart regulation, something like that, even smarter than before in the other sectors. So I will not be very long, just to tell you that yes, we believe that we will extend the Florence School of Regulation. The water part will become the water and municipal waste. Because we believe that this is a very exciting topic we discussed today. So you will have some news very soon online, and as many of you already asked in the conversation part of Zoom, you will also have some information about how to download the slides of the presentation, so don't worry about this. So thanks a lot, everybody, and see you very soon. We keep in touch. Look at the website. Thank you very much.